It is the final form of the Digimon species, whose whole body is covered in the strongest metal chrome digizite alloy. Its metal body reflects every attack. Furthermore, it has the fastest speed of movement among aquatic Digimon. As Omegamon was in pursuit of the Dark Masters, it decided to take off in the direction that it believed that it could find Puppetmon. However, this would lead it on a searching journey, as it had heard from the recon given to it by Blackware Garurumon that there had been areas that Puppetmon had talked about, where other Dark Masters could be. In Omegamon's case, it raced that if it could catch more than one Dark Master at once, it could probably defeat them both easily. As it raced across the desert, it would eventually find itself at the shoreline coast, sparkling and shining as it normally is. Although it seems peaceful and tranquil, Omegamon was given specific instructions that a Dark Master has definitely taken refuge here in the near the net ocean, and it would search for it here, as if it could not find Puppetmon, it would at least come back with one. As Omegamon searched the area far and wide, it was about to go over the water, seemingly thinking that if the Dark Master were to hide anywhere, it would hide in the endless expanse of the water. However, as Omegamon was about to touch over the water, a beam torrent of water ripped out, shooting near across it. Although it did not hit Omegamon, it was clear that this wasn't from simple Digimon. Something much more powerful had fired it. And seemingly, as Omegamon dodged it, more and more Digimon began to appear on the water as they began to pop up in almost groups, seeming to line up in attack formations. They began to assemble in front of Omegamon as from the water something began to rise, as behind them something long and snake-like began to appear, as it was massive in size. This was not your average Digimon. As it began to come into view, Omegamon was surprised at the long, serpentine, metallic Digimon that it had never seen before, as this one stood behind all the other Digimon, as the Digimon that had fallen up in their ranks, being Gesomon and Sealamon, had always been prepared for the instructions to attack. And in their case, this Digimon finally spoke up, as it knew who Omegamon was, calling it out, as it had been warned in advance about its arrival, as Omegamon was very sure that this must have been the Dark Master. As, finally, Metal Seedramon introduced itself, as it would tell it that it is the master of being Shrewd, and it is the Dark Master, Metal Seedramon. As to the surprise of Omegamon, it was rather confused that the Dark Master simply opened up, as if it had been warned ahead of time by Puppetmon, it should know that it was about to be attacked. However, this is where Metal Seedramon surprised everyone, as all it did was yell, "Destroy him!" As all the Digimon prepared to attack Omegamon, even Metal Seedramon charged up its cannon. As Omegamon finally realized that by preparing and being warned ahead of time, this Dark Master was prepared to make a stand and not be a coward like Puppetmon. As Omegamon was being blasted at, it knew that this wasn't an opportune situation, as although it could have defeated all the Digimon, this isn't what it wants, as seemingly all the Digimon that are attacking don't seem to be grunts, as they had learned inside the forest and the jungle that Puppetmon and the Dark Masters are seemingly taking any innocent Digimon who may or may not want power and using that against them, turning them into their slaves. So, in the case of Omegamon, if they could be helped and turned, then maybe there was a chance to save them, as Omegamon would dart away. However, to its surprise, as it would go further down the coast, it would run into a group of Digimon, as it feared it was going to be attacked. However, the Digimon did not seem to be in an attacking mood, as they seemed to be heading in the direction of the explosions. So they stopped the moment they saw Omegamon, wanting to get into contact with it, which surprised it. As from the waters below, a Waymon appeared, not to the size of its usual mega or ultimate level, but seemingly sized enough for a champion. As another Digimon, familiar ones appeared, that being Ikakumon and Birdramon. As Omegamon would reminisce really quickly on the moment it had met both of its friends in the past, However, this Ikakumon, this Bergermon specifically, stopped in order to speak to Omegamon, as Omegamon was surprised, as both of them wanted to know if Omegamon was the one that was sent here to destroy Puppetmon. As the confirmation was made, Bergermon explained that it would explain everything to Omegamon if it followed. So the group went away, as Omegamon did not seem to not be afraid of them, as it seemingly could trust those that reminded them of their friend. As we would finally be returned to the jungle, we would see that Black Garurumon had indeed joined the group in the jungle, being Kabuterimon, Togemon, and Leomon, as it would tell Bergermon that they would stay behind in order to protect the jungle from any more of Puppetmon's problems, but Bergermon would need to go on ahead in order to rally allies, that if anyone were to stop the Dark Masters, it would be Omegamon, but they needed someone to go, and the rest of them needed to stay. So Bergermon, understanding its task, decided it was best that it would go, and in doing so, would take off. As Omegamon had went to search the desert, Bergermon went straight to the coastline, believing that if there was any better chance to find Omegamon, it would probably run into it there. However, it would see a sight that was very grim, as this is the moment it would meet its compatriots, being the fact that Waymon and Kakumon did not want to join Metal Seadramon's cause. Sealamon and Gasomon were told to dispose of both of them, as after they were ganged up on and beaten, Waymon was left beached along the shore, as Ikakumon was defeated right beside it. As both of them were unsure of what was going to happen, they assumed that other Digimon would just come and pick them off. However, to their surprise, the first Digimon that found them was actually Bergermon, as Bergermon saw that both of them were stuck, but more importantly, Waymon was the one that was the most in trouble. It decided to aid them, as it was able to push Waymon back into the water, and Ikakumon was eventually able to right itself with some aid. As both thanked their savior, Bergermon told them of what was needed, and that a hero was coming to stop the Dark Masters, and seemingly both of them agreed that if they stood any chance, they'd stand a chance together. As the story would conclude, Omegamon would understand that these are heroes, true and through, as just like his friends, they decided that they would aid those Digimon that needed it most and stop the Dark Masters. Feeling inspired seeing its friends once again, it decided it knew what it had to do, as Omegamon would join them and lead them into battle, as it would prominently say, and proudly with its chest, that we would strike at dusk, rallying these champion Digimon behind one of the most powerful Digimon, their savior. As we would go back to see where Metal Seadramon was, we would be informed of the scouts, as unfortunately Metal Seadramon was angry, as Omegamon had escaped, and blamed the champion Digimon who had failed in order to hunt it. Now, as his name is, the master of being Shrewd, it held no qualms, and failure was no option. And as coldly as it felt, in order to make an example, it blasted the Sealamon from behind. And this absolutely destroyed them, as the Gesomon that were terrified began to squirm in front of Seadramon. Seadramon made it clear that any more failure would result in their deaths. As from behind them, a void began to open, this being Warumanzemon, finally arriving, as it needed to speak to Metal Seadramon. Warumanzemon was explaining to Metal Seadramon the situation that happened in the jungle, and how, unfortunately, their plans were cut a bit short, as Puppetmon was forced to flee alongside it. However, Metal Seadramon saw this as the opportunity to succeed where Puppetmon had failed, as it would chastise that Puppetmon was always the pushover of the group, being too cowardly to do anything else. The Metal Seadramon would do its best to deal with Omegamon, and it would show it in true. As Metal Seadramon would go back out to sea, it knew that it had a plan, and it was going to enact it in order to defeat Omegamon once and for all. As Warumanzemon would watch as Metal Seadramon left, it knew that there would be something interesting that was going to happen. As time would pass to night, as dusk was beginning to appear, the group led by Omegamon slowly began to make their way down the coastline, as, with information from Waymon and Ikakumon, The heroes realized that the best way in order to stop the Digimon would be to spring attack them when they least expected it, but most importantly, to end up dealing with the ranks first before going after Metal Seadramon. As they would prepare, as Gessamons would begin to rally around the ocean on the coastline, they normally would be deeper out in sea, but thanks to Metal Seadramon being effectively their leader, they were able to do whatever they pleased, coming onto shore and harassing other Digimon, as normally this is what they do. However, this would be a night to remember, as out of nowhere from above, Birdramon and Omegamon showed up above them. Being able to fly really does have its perks, as the Gessamon were completely confused as to what was going on. However, before they could even respond, they were attacked, as Meteor Wings and the Supreme Cannon's fire ended up destroying them. As Omegamon realized that some would have to be defeated in order for it to accomplish its mission fully, and some of the ranks of Digimon were never going to convert to being good again anyways, as in order to continue keeping the peace, it would have to do some sacrifice. As these explosions would ring out, Sealamon that weren't too far away would hear it. However, they would not receive any much more fair, as even before they could react, Waymon and Ikakumon appeared. In order to deal with them, many were attacked, as multiple torpedoes were fired from Ikakumon, and even Waymon reared up to fire its raging water from the back of its blowhole in order to defeat them. However, some would manage to escape and head towards Metal Seadramon. As alone Gessamon and alone Sealamon were able to make their way to Metal Seadramon, they informed that they were being attacked, as both sides of each of these champion Digimon were trying to hold out as best they can while being assaulted. As Metal Seadramon would attempt to send them away, telling them not to worry, that it could easily handle this with its own allies. As both would leave, two Digimon would appear in front of Metal Seadramon, that being Waru Seadramon and the other being Mega Seadramon. As Metal Seadramon smiled and knew that these Digimon could help it in defeating, once and for all, the one and only Omegamon. As both would turn their way, Metal Seadramon would tell them to be ready, as he was coming. As Omegamon began to go even deeper away, it turned away, knowing that its best opportunity was to hunt, and finally stops Metal Seadramon here, as it left its allies to deal with the threats. As finally, Metal Seadramon, who had been waiting, was waiting, and it was not happy, as when Omegamon appeared in front of it, it knew that it was time to fight. Very similarly to Puppetmon, Omegamon gave the spiel, as it would tell Metal Seadramon that in violation of its assault across the digital world, and in the honor of Yggdrasil itself, it was condemned, and it was about to be destroyed. However, before Omegamon could ask for any last words, ripplings and explosions were heard behind it, as two more Digimon finally appeared, that being Mega Seadramon and Waru Seadramon, as Omegamon finally realized that it was in a pincer. Trapped by Metal Seadramon, it knew it was time to spring the assault on their unknown threat. As, in order to make sure that they could do the job, Metal Seadramon launched dark gears to both Waru Seadramon and Mega Seadramon, as both of them would engulf and swallow them. It would give them more than enough power in order to take on this illustrious knight. As Omegamon was surprised, as it had seen the gears once again, knowing of their power and what they could do. However, Omegamon stood fast, as it knew that it did not need to fear them, as the black gears themselves don't necessarily make them invincible. However, it will make them more annoying to fight, as unfortunately for it, it does not know how much power they've gained, as the dark gears, as it's seen before, give unnatural amounts of power. However, it comes at the cost of thought, as many Digimon given black gears start to be more feral, and in its case, it was surrounded, as they began to attack. As the lightning began to course through all three of them, the triangular lightning strike was on hand, as Omegamon was prepared to deal with whatever. As unfortunately for them, even with their massive buffs, Omegamon hasn't been fully challenged, as since its battle with Millenniumon, it hasn't really seen any more action than normal, and even the fight in the jungle wasn't really much of a test. However, this would be interesting to see, as both of the ultimate Seedramons fired off, with Metal Seedramon right behind it, as an explosion would ring out. However, to their surprise, once the smoke cleared, it was shocking that Omegamon hadn't been taking any damage, as unfortunately for them, the Brave Shield is extremely powerful. However, being tested for the first time against these threats, Omegamon was more than surprised that didn't even dent them a little, as the Brave Shield didn't take any damage and neither did Omegamon. Seeing the opportunity, it decided to show that it wasn't going to be playing around any longer, as with a swift slash, both of the ultimate Seedramons were cut. Not cut down, but at least losing their horns, as this amount of damage was more than enough for either of them to take, as they would fall away. Seeing no other option, Metal Seedramon was very angry. Calling them cowards, it decided that it had no other option, and charged up as much energy as it could, as it knew that its ultimate stream was its only way to probably get out of this fight, as Omegamon rallied its Supreme Cannon, as both would have to meet in the middle and see who would come out on top. As although not a coward, Metal Seedramon sees the terrifying strength that Puppetmon must have had to deal with, as unfortunately, it's finally recognizing fear for the first time, and usually being the one to dish it out. Metal Seedramon was shocked, as Omegamon didn't seem any worse for wear, ready to defeat them all in all. Seeing that there was no other option left, it had to fire its attack and hope that it was enough. But, in the case that it was being surprised, both attacks were holding their own. But luckily for Metal Seedramon, being a coward has its perks. And with the arrival of an ally, it knew it was time to cut out. As with Waru Monzaemon finally arriving and cutting a void, Metal Seedramon would have to escape, as this would be the only way for it to survive. And with its survival, the Dark Masters stood a better chance at winning. As they would vanish, Omegamon would be somewhat upset, as once again a Dark Master had escaped it, as it knew something must be up, as this Waru Monzaemon must have something more to do with the group than properly thought, as instead of just being a henchman to help them escape, it seems to have a power all of its own, far greater than anyone could imagine. As Omegamon would be left there, wondering what to do next, its allies would rally around it, seemingly able to drive away the enemy Digimon, and finally being able to bring peace to the coastline once again. As Omegamon would be told by Birdramon that the area had been clear. Now, knowing that they had protected the coastline once and for all, Birdramon said it would remain and stay, as Omegamon would pursue, as the next location it was headed for was one it knew all too well. As it had heard in the desert area, a new Metal Empire had been forged. However, the one leading it right now was a terrifying Digimon it knew from its past, that being Machinedramon. As it knew and heard the rumors that a Machinedramon had taken place and finally found its way into the Dark Masters, this is one that it would pursue last, or in the later stages. However, after dealing with Metal Seedramon, it knew that it would probably be best to deal with it now, as if the Metal Empire itself, like the Ocean Digimon, had allied themselves with this Dark Master, it would become a bigger problem, and the sooner it dealt with that, the easier it would be, as only 2 more locations remain. Omegamon is now steadily hunting the Dark Masters, but they've escaped so far. However, with an old foe about to face Omegamon, will this Machinedramon escape? And what is the up with Waru Monzaemon? Why is he so sneaky and different? What purpose does he serve? And what will Omegamon do next? However, we'll have to wait until the next one. So as always, this is Brad from the Ad Army signing off. And for all of you out there to sign on.